The shift was endless. I drove clients back and forth along familiar routes, not even remembering their faces. Everything blurred together, conversations, sounds, flashing headlights. When the clock passed midnight, I realized I couldn't go on. Sleep was dragging me down. The only thought in my mind was to get home, collapse onto my bed, and forget this day. The streets were deserted. A few cars passed by, leaving only an echo behind in the alleys. I sped down the avenue as if through a tunnel. The headlights cut through the darkness, revealing only small patches of road, while everything else dissolved into blackness. Waves of sleep washed over me. My eyelids grew heavy. My grip on the wheel weakened. "Not now," I told myself. "Just hold on a little longer." But my body wouldn't listen. For a moment, I closed my eyes. Just for a second. I snapped awake as the car veered off course. My heart lurched. Jerking the wheel, I barely managed to straighten out. My breathing was unsteady. I pulled over, resting my head on the steering wheel. Just exhaustion, I thought, trying to convince myself. But something twisted inside me. A cold knot of fear. For the rest of the drive, I was careful. Home greeted me with silence. The entrance hall seemed empty, as it always did at night, but I noticed the corridor lights were dimmer than usual. Stepping into my apartment, I didn't bother taking off my shoes or changing. I collapsed onto the bed, still wearing my jacket. Sleep swallowed me like a giant wave. I woke to an eerie silence. The apartment was unnaturally quiet, as if the whole world had died. I glanced at the clock. 7 a.m. Why is it still dark? Approaching the window, I saw nothing but pitch-black night outside. No streetlights, no glow from the city, nothing. The neighboring apartments were dark as well. The world outside seemed frozen in dead time. My first thought was a temporary power outage. Grabbing my phone, I saw no signal. "Perfect," I muttered, trying to turn on the TV. Nothing. Even the radio played only white noise. Outside, the wind howled, a strange, unsettling sound, like something forcing its way through the cracks of the old building. I threw on my jacket, deciding to go out and figure out what was happening. Stepping outside, I froze. The streets were empty, silent, not a single person. Even the birds and stray dogs that usually lurked around were gone. Only my footsteps echoed in the cold air. I got into my car and started the engine. The radio was still dead, as if the entire world had simply shut off. I decided to drive to the dispatch station. Maybe I could find some answers there. The empty streets greeted me with dead silence. The buildings looked unfamiliar, like they had been abandoned for years. Sometimes I thought I heard footsteps, or a faint whisper behind me, but every time I turned around, there was nothing. And then I saw a figure. A man stood on the roadside. His silhouette was barely visible in the darkness, but he raised his hand as if hailing a taxi. Chills ran down my spine. For some reason, I didn't want to stop. Something about him felt wrong, but driving past seemed even scarier. I stopped and rolled down the window. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to sound calm, but my voice trembled. He looked at me with a long, piercing stare. His face was pale, his eyes dark as the night itself. "Far away," he said immediately, "but you'll make it in time." His words sent a cold shiver through me, but I couldn't drive away. It felt like my hands had fused to the wheel, and the gas pedal simply wasn't there. He got into the back seat, and at that moment, the air inside the car became thick, almost suffocating. "Where to?" I asked, feeling cold sweat trickle down my back. "Just drive straight," he answered calmly. "We'll talk on the way." The car started moving on its own, and I realized there was no turning back. I drove through the empty streets, and this strange passenger never took his eyes off me. His stare wasn't aggressive, yet it felt like it was tearing me apart from the inside. I tried to focus on the road, but my hands were shaking. "Who are you?" I finally forced out, breaking the crushing silence. "You already know who I am," he replied, without looking away. Excuse me? You're dead. He said it so calmly, as if discussing the weather. The words hit me like a punch. My heart pounded. My breathing turned erratic. Is this some kind of joke? What nonsense! I shouted, barely keeping the car steady. Remember, he said with a slight smile. You fell asleep at the wheel. Remember how your heart clenched in fear? How you tried to straighten the car? Images of the night surfaced in my mind, the screech of tires, the jerk of the steering wheel, and then a sudden feeling of emptiness. No, this is a dream. I was almost screaming, but my words felt hollow. A dream? You're lucky if you can call it that. Usually, I don't give people a second chance. A second chance for what? To return. His words cut through me like a knife. Fear, doubt, anger, all swirled inside my head. This is some prank. You're trying to scare me. You ... I started, but my voice wavered. He said nothing. Slowly, he extended his hand forward. And in that instant, the gas pedal slammed to the floor. The car shot forward at an insane speed. I barely managed to grip the wheel. What are you doing? I shouted, clutching the steering wheel, trying to keep the car on the road. Calm down, he said softly. You only have to do one thing. What? Prove that you want to live. I do. Of course I do. I yelled, trying to slow the car, but the pedals were fused to the floor. Words mean nothing. Show me. The world around me began to change. The streets vanished into impenetrable darkness. The lights of the houses disappeared, and the road turned into a narrow serpentine path, as if carved into a mountainside. You're afraid, aren't you? But fear isn't enough. Tell me, what are you willing to live for? For my family? For my job? For everything. I tried to shout the words, but each time they sounded hollow. Family? Have you seen your parents in the last year, or your friends? Or does your job, the one you hate, truly make you happy? His words rang true. I clenched my teeth, trying not to listen, but they echoed like undeniable facts. You didn't appreciate your life. You merely existed like a machine. That's not true. Then prove it. He smiled. A cold wave washed over me. The questions came like a hailstorm. Have you ever thought about the future? Do you love anyone? Would you sacrifice yourself for someone else? Each word hit like a hammer. The car was racing down a road that kept deteriorating. It felt like any moment we would plunge into the abyss. I tried to answer, but my responses were weak. He just shook his head. You still don't understand what it means to be alive. And at that moment, the car reached the edge of a cliff. The road was gone. Ahead lay only emptiness. I gripped the steering wheel, feeling myself being pulled downward. Stop! Stop! I'm not the one driving. He grinned. And in that instant, something clicked in my mind. I remembered those rare moments of happiness, reunions with friends, even a simple sunset after a long shift. That was life. I want to live. I want to make things right. The world around me exploded in crimson light, blinding me. The car froze in midair. His voice no longer came from inside. It came from everywhere. You've proven yourself. But remember, a second chance is a privilege, not a right. In the next moment, I woke up. Everything was as before. My bed, the sunlight, the alarm ringing. But on my wrist remained a mark, a thin red line, like a burn, and in my heart, an unbearable fear. To forget what it means to live,